Have you ever looked around your own family's table and realized you don't belong there anymore? That's what happened to me. I raised my son, gave him everything I had, and when my husband passed, I thought moving in with him would bring comfort. Instead, it brought silence, humiliation, and betrayal. But this isn't just a sad story. It's about the day I finally stood up, packed my suitcase, and took my life back. Because sometimes, losing your family is how you finally find yourself. The night my daughter-in-law asked me not to sit at the table, something inside me quietly broke. I can still hear her voice, soft, polite, sharp as glass. "Could you not sit with us, Margaret? It makes the guests uncomfortable." Everyone froze. My fork trembled above the plate I had spent the entire day cooking for them. My son didn't even look up. I laughed, a thin sound that cracked halfway through. I told myself she didn't mean it. That she was tired. That maybe I had misunderstood. But when I saw her glance at the empty chair beside her, then at me, it was clear. I wasn't part of the family table anymore. I was the extra chair. The one that could be moved aside. That night, after the dishes were done and the laughter upstairs faded, I sat in the dark kitchen and whispered, "You're fading, Margaret." When my husband passed away, my son Ethan was the one who said, "Mom, you shouldn't live alone. Move in with us. We'll take care of you." It sounded like love, like safety, like family. I sold my little house in Springfield, the one my husband and I worked our whole lives to pay off, and I used most of the money to help Ethan and his wife buy a bigger home. They promised I'd always have a room there. A place to belong. At first, it felt good. I helped around the house, cooked dinners, packed the kids' lunches, paid for groceries when things got tight. It gave me purpose, and I believed that if I kept giving, I'd stay needed. But kindness can be mistaken for weakness. And that's exactly what happened. The little comments started slowly. "Mom, you don't have to buy all this food. You're wasting your pension," she'd say, laughing. Or, "Maybe you shouldn't try to do laundry anymore. You forget to use the right settings." Forget. That word became her favorite. I didn't forget. I noticed. I noticed how they started whispering in the kitchen when I entered the room. How she would stop talking the moment I stepped in. How Ethan avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions like, "Are we still having dinner together tonight?" The first time it really hit me was over something small. I'd cooked dinner, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. The food sat untouched while they scrolled on their phones. Then she said, "You didn't have to cook, Margaret. We already ordered takeout." No one had told me. I sat there, staring at the untouched plates, realizing I had cooked for no one. Not even for gratitude, just habit. I told myself they were busy. That modern life was just fast. That I shouldn't take things personally. But then I started noticing how my things were disappearing. A picture frame, my husband's old watch, a blanket I'd brought from my house. Every time I asked, she'd say, "Oh, the kids probably moved it," or, "It's somewhere, don't worry." The more I tried to stay useful, the more I felt invisible. I cleaned the kitchen, she complained I'd used the wrong sponge. I folded laundry, she refolded it with a sigh. I took care of the kids after school, she told me not to confuse them with my old-fashioned ideas. It wasn't just criticism, it was control. And Ethan, my own son, just kept saying, "Mom, you know how she gets. Don't make it worse," as if her behavior was something I should tiptoe around. I started eating in my room. Not because they asked me to, but because it was easier than feeling unwanted at the dinner table. Once, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She laughed and said, "It's like having an extra teenager in the house. Only this one can't move out." I sat in the hallway, frozen. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up sewing Ethan's clothes after my husband lost his job. Of the extra shifts I'd worked so he could finish college. And now I was a burden. A joke. Still, I kept telling myself this was temporary. That grief had made us all a little strange, that she'd soften eventually, and that my son would remember who raised him. But she didn't soften. She got smarter, colder. She started leaving mail on my nightstand that wasn't mine, brochures for senior homes, assisted living facilities, retirement communities. When I asked her about it, she said, "Oh, just some options, Margaret. You deserve structure and care." Structure, care, words that sounded kind but felt like eviction notices. That night, I sat on my bed and stared at the brochure. The cover showed smiling gray-haired people playing bingo. I thought about how far I'd come from the woman who once ran a household, raised a son, buried a husband, to someone being quietly pushed aside like old furniture. I wanted to believe Ethan didn't know what was happening, that he just didn't see it. But deep down, I knew he did. He just didn't want to deal with it. And maybe that hurt the most, the silence of the person I loved most in the world. Still, I stayed. Because that's what mothers do. We stay, even when it stops feeling like home. It started small. A few quiet changes that didn't seem worth arguing about. My name was removed from the grocery app, then from the cable bill. She said it was just easier if she handled everything. At first, I didn't mind. I thought she was just being organized. But one afternoon, when the mail arrived, I noticed something strange, an envelope from my bank, addressed to her. When I asked about it, she smiled like it was nothing. Oh, they probably sent it by mistake. I handle most of the household stuff online anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen for water and heard them talking in the next room. Her voice, low and sharp. Her pension barely covers anything. If we could just get access to her account, it would make life easier. And then Ethan, my son, the boy I raised, the man I trusted most, said, "Yeah, Mom's not great with money anymore. Maybe we should take over before she messes something up." I stood there in the dark, gripping the counter. I wanted to believe I'd heard wrong. But I hadn't. From that day on, everything I did was under a microscope. If I forgot to buy milk, it became a sign that I was losing it. If I paid a bill twice by mistake, she'd sigh and say, "See what I mean, Ethan?" I started doubting myself. That's how they get you, not with yelling, but with suggestion. One afternoon, Ethan sat me down at the kitchen table. "Mom, maybe it's time we help with your finances. Just to make sure everything's in order." I looked at him and asked, "Do you think I can't handle my own money?" He hesitated, then said softly, "We just want to protect you." Protect me. Those two words made my skin crawl. He slid a paper across the table, a form from the bank. Power of attorney, it said at the top. "It's just so we can help manage things if something ever happens to you," he explained. Standard stuff. I didn't sign it. I told him I'd think about it. He looked disappointed, almost annoyed. She didn't even try to hide her frustration. "Margaret, this would make everyone's life easier," she said. "You can't expect us to babysit your bills forever." Babysit. That's what she called helping her husband's mother. From that point on, the atmosphere in the house changed. She stopped pretending to like me. Conversations got shorter. Meals went quiet. The kids were told I needed rest, so they stopped coming to my room. I started keeping my financial papers locked in a small box under my bed. I changed my bank password and stopped mentioning anything about money. Still, I could feel them watching me. One morning, I went to make coffee and overheard her on the phone. "Yes, I think we can handle it. She won't even notice." Her tone was businesslike, rehearsed. I stepped into the kitchen, and she jumped. "Oh, morning," she said, too brightly. Later that week, I got a call from my bank asking to confirm a request for a joint account. I never made that request. When I told Ethan, he brushed it off. "Probably a mistake, Mom. Don't stress." But I saw the way he avoided my eyes. That night, I sat in my room with my old photo albums spread across the bed. Pictures of Ethan as a baby, of his father smiling at his graduation. I kept staring at those photos, wondering where that version of him went. The boy who used to pick dandelions for me on Mother's Day. Now, he was a stranger sitting across from me at dinner, quietly agreeing with his wife while she planned my future without me. I tried to talk to him one last time. "Ethan," I said, "do you really think I'd lose track of my own life? My money? My mind?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Mom, you're not the same. You forget things." That was the moment something in me froze. Because I realized he wasn't defending me, he was justifying her. After that, I stopped trying. I stayed quiet, kept to myself, watched every word I said. But the truth was already there, sitting heavy in the room. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a resource, a line on a budget. And the worst part? They didn't even see it as cruelty. They thought it was practical, logical. They thought it made sense. That night, I wrote a note in my journal. They don't see me as family. They see me as income. And for the first time, I started to wonder how much of me would be left if I stayed. Silence can be crueler than words. You learn that when every sound you make starts to bother the people you live with. By then, mornings in that house felt like walking on glass. If I hummed while making coffee, she sighed loudly from the living room. If I sat quietly in my room, she told Ethan I was being moody. There was no right way to exist. I used to think homes were supposed to be filled with noise, kids running around, people talking, laughter from the TV. But in their house, silence had rules. And every time I broke one, she found a way to remind me I didn't belong. One morning, she left a glossy brochure on my nightstand. On the cover was a picture of a smiling couple sitting in a garden with the words, "Your new chapter, independent senior living." When I asked about it, she said, "Just an idea, Margaret. You deserve more structure, more people your own age." Her voice was calm, polite, like she was offering me a recipe, not suggesting I move out of my son's house. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and held the brochure in my hands. The walls around me were quiet, but my mind wouldn't stop buzzing. Structure. That's what she said I needed. As if I was some project that needed managing. I thought about all the years I'd spent building a life around other people's needs. Staying up late sewing Ethan's school costumes. Picking up extra shifts when his father got laid off. Cooking, cleaning, saving. I had built my life around care. And now, that care was an inconvenience. The next few weeks were worse. She started locking the pantry at night. "Kids eat too many snacks," she said, but I knew the real reason. She didn't want me touching anything. She moved my things around, too. The family photos I'd placed on the hallway shelf disappeared one day. "I just wanted to declutter," she said. The only picture left was of their family, the four of them smiling in matching sweaters. Ethan noticed none of it. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. When he came home from work, I tried to talk to him. "Ethan, are we okay?" I asked one night. "Of course, Mom," he said without looking up from his phone. Why wouldn't we be? But his tone said everything. Short, distant, like he was talking to a stranger. I stopped cooking. I stopped trying. I spent most of my days in my room, folding and refolding the same clothes just to have something to do. Sometimes I'd hear laughter from downstairs. The sound of their life continuing without me. The kids running, her voice calling them for dinner. My name was never mentioned. Once, I walked into the kitchen while she was on a video call with a friend. "Oh, that's just Ethan's mom," she said when I walked by, waving dismissively. "She lives with us for now." For now. 2 words that made me feel like a guest in my own son's life. I started taking long walks in the evenings just to be somewhere else. I'd pass houses with lights glowing warmly inside, families eating together. I wondered if anyone in those houses realized how lucky they were, to be wanted, to be heard. The final straw came on a Sunday morning. I went to pour myself coffee and found my mug missing. The one my husband had given me years ago, the one that said, "Best mom ever." I searched every cabinet, every drawer. It was gone. When I asked, she shrugged. "It broke. Things get old. Things get old." That night, I heard Ethan and her talking in their room. Her voice was clear, firm. "She needs to go, Ethan. This isn't working. I can't live like this anymore." He said nothing for a long time. Then finally, "I'll talk to her." But he never did. Days passed, and the air in the house grew heavier. Meals became silent transactions. The kids stopped visiting my room. The TV stayed off when I entered the living room. Even the dog avoided me. I realized something simple but hard to face: they didn't hate me. They just didn't want to see me. One evening, I walked past the mirror in the hallway. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman looking back, shoulders hunched, eyes tired, mouth set in a line that had forgotten how to smile. That's when I knew silence wasn't just around me. It had gotten inside me too. I had become invisible. Not because I was old or forgetful or fragile, but because they decided I was easier to ignore than to love. And that kind of silence doesn't just hurt. It changes you. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The mail had come, and like always, I sorted it into piles on the kitchen counter. Bills, advertisements, bank statements. One envelope caught my eye. It was addressed to me but marked, "Urgent," from the bank. When I opened it, I froze. The letter said my son had attempted to access my retirement account using a power of attorney form. My name was spelled right, but the signature wasn't mine. I sat there at the kitchen table, my hands shaking. I read the letter twice, then 3 times, trying to convince myself it had to be a mistake. It couldn't be Ethan, not my son, not the boy who used to make me birthday cards out of construction paper. But deep down, I knew. When he came home that evening, I was waiting for him. I held the letter in my hand. "Ethan, what is this?" I asked, my voice steady but low. He glanced at it, sighed, and rubbed his forehead. "Mom, it's not a big deal. We were just trying to make things easier for you." "We?" I repeated. His wife walked in, drying her hands with a towel. "We thought you'd appreciate some help," she said. "Finances can be confusing at your age." At my age. The way she said it made my stomach twist. "You forged my name," I said quietly. She gave a little laugh. "Oh, come on, Margaret. No one's trying to hurt you. It's just paperwork." Ethan stepped closer. "Mom, calm down. We were just trying to make sure everything's safe." "Safe for who?" I asked. My hands were trembling now. "Because this doesn't look like safety. This looks like theft." His expression changed, a flash of guilt, then defensiveness. "You're overreacting. You've been stressed lately, maybe a little forgetful. We're just trying to take care of things before something happens." There it was again, that word. Forgetful. The word they used to make me doubt myself. I looked at him for a long moment, really looked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And that told me everything I needed to know. "I may be old," I said, "but I'm not stupid. And I'm not senile. You crossed a line." She rolled her eyes. "We're family, Margaret. Family shares things. Not this," I said. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to slow my breathing. The house felt different now, colder, smaller. Every photo on the wall suddenly looked like a lie. I thought about calling the police, but I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't want my son's name in a report. I didn't want that kind of stain on our family. So instead, I called the bank. The woman on the phone was kind but firm. She froze all shared access and put an alert on my account. Then she gave me the number for a senior legal aid office. The next day, I went there in person. The lawyer was a woman around my age, with gray hair pulled into a bun and eyes that looked like they'd seen this before. She listened quietly as I told her what had happened. When I finished, she said, "You did the right thing calling us. You'd be surprised how common this is." That sentence hit me like a punch. How common this is. All those stories on the news about elder fraud, I'd never thought they could happen in a family like mine. She helped me file the paperwork to protect my accounts and advised me to gather copies of every document in the house. "You're not just securing your money," she said. "You're taking back your control." That night, when I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were upstairs, and the lights in the kitchen were off. As I walked in, I heard whispering in the next room. Her voice again, sharp as a knife. "She's turning paranoid. We need to move fast before she changes the locks or something." My chest tightened. I stood there in the hallway, listening to my son say, "Just give it a few days. She'll calm down." I realized then that there was nothing left to calm down for. I went back to my room, took out a small suitcase from under the bed, and began to pack. A few clothes, my photo albums, some paperwork, my late husband's watch. When I zipped the bag, the sound felt final. Before I left, I sat on the bed and looked around one last time. My husband's picture was still on the nightstand. I touched the frame and whispered, "You'd tell me to go." And I knew he would. I left a note on the kitchen table. It said only 3 words, "I'm done here." When I walked out that door, I didn't look back. At the bus station, I sat with my suitcase beside me and my phone in my hand. Ethan's name flashed on the screen once, twice, then stopped. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. I found a small apartment near the community center in town. The first night there, the quiet felt different. Not the heavy silence of their house, this was peaceful. My own. The next morning, I called the lawyer again to finalize everything. My accounts were secure. My name was safe. And for the first time in years, so was I. That's when I realized something I should have known all along. Sometimes, love doesn't mean staying. Sometimes, love means walking away before you lose the last pieces of yourself trying to be wanted. That was the turning point. The day I stopped asking to be treated like family and started treating myself like a person again. The morning after I left, I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in years, I didn't hear doors slamming, kids arguing, or her voice telling me what I'd done wrong. Just quiet. My own quiet. I sat on the edge of my new bed, a basic twin mattress in a small senior apartment. The place was simple. Beige walls, a tiny kitchen, a window that looked out over the community garden. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. That word, mine, felt heavier than I expected. I made coffee in the small pot I'd bought at the thrift store the day before. It didn't taste great, but it was freedom in a cup. Later that morning, I walked down to the leasing office to finish my paperwork. The manager, a kind woman named June, smiled when she handed me my keys. "Welcome home, Margaret," she said. I almost cried right there in front of her. The first week, I kept waiting for Ethan to show up. Part of me wanted him to. The other part prayed he wouldn't. He called twice and left messages, short, rehearsed apologies that sounded more like damage control than regret. "Mom, can we talk? You left so suddenly. We didn't mean for things to go that way." I didn't call back. I couldn't. Instead, I started building something new. Small things at first. I joined a painting class at the community center, just to keep my hands busy. The first day, I sat at the back of the room, embarrassed by how clumsy I felt holding a brush. But by the end of the session, I had painted something that looked almost like a field of sunflowers. It wasn't good, but it was mine. People there were friendly. Not nosy, not judgmental. Just real. There was Carol, who'd lost her husband last year and was learning to drive again at 68. And Tony, who used to be a mechanic until arthritis made it impossible to work. Everyone had their own version of starting over. No one pitied anyone else. For the first time, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a person. One afternoon, I stopped by the farmer's market down the street. They were looking for volunteers for a weekend bake sale. "I used to bake," I said, and before I knew it, I was standing behind a table selling pies I'd made in my tiny oven. The first customer, a young mom, took a bite and said, "This is incredible. You should sell these every week." I laughed, but that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next Saturday, I showed up with 6 pies instead of 2. By noon, they were gone. Someone asked if I could take orders. So, I made a sign, "Miss Margaret's Pies." It sounds small, but standing behind that table, talking to people, seeing them smile at something I made, it gave me a kind of pride I hadn't felt in years. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's wife, but as myself. Money wasn't the point, though it helped. What mattered was that people looked at me and saw value. Not in what I could give them financially, but in what I created with my own hands. A few months passed like that, quiet, steady, good. I slept through the night. I started laughing again, real laughter, the kind that makes your chest ache a little. Then, one afternoon, I saw Ethan's number flash on my phone again. I didn't answer. I let it ring out. He left a message. "Mom, we're worried about you. Can we come visit?" I sat there, listening to his voice. It sounded tired. Guilty, maybe. But not enough. Because worry comes easy when you lose control of what you thought belonged to you. I deleted the voicemail. Some people say forgiveness brings peace. Maybe that's true for them. For me, peace came the moment I stopped explaining myself to people who never listened. One night, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sun set behind the garden. A neighbor's radio played an old song I hadn't heard in years. I thought about my husband, how proud he'd be to see me standing on my own 2 feet again. How he'd smile that quiet smile of his and say, "You always were stronger than you thought." And I guess he was right. I had spent so many years being afraid of what would happen if I left. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of losing family. But the truth is, I wasn't losing them. They had been gone long before I walked out that door. What I lost was fear. And what I found was me. These days, my mornings start the same way. A cup of coffee, the smell of fresh pies baking, and a little notebook where I write new recipes and small thoughts. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Ethan will ever really understand what he did. Maybe he will one day. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'm done waiting. Because life, even at 70, isn't about what's been taken from you. It's about what you decide to take back. And I finally took back mine. 6 months passed before I realized I was no longer counting days since I left. I stopped waking up wondering if I'd made a mistake. The truth was simple, I hadn't. Leaving was the best decision I'd made in decades. Life in the senior apartment turned into something I didn't expect: normal. Peaceful. I didn't have to tiptoe anymore or explain my every move. My space stayed exactly the way I left it. If something was gone, it was because I moved it. That alone felt like a small miracle. My pie stall at the local farmer's market became more than just a hobby. It turned into a business. People started calling me Miss Margaret, and I leaned into it. I made apple, cherry, pecan, and my husband's favorite, lemon meringue. Each Saturday, the same regulars came by. They'd tell me stories about their families, their jobs, their lives. I listened. Sometimes they stayed just to talk. I think we all needed that, a place to be seen. I started keeping a notebook with people's names and favorite flavors. That way, when they came back, I'd remember. 1 apple crumble for Linda, I'd say, and she'd smile like she'd just been remembered by the world again. I didn't make much money, but I made enough to pay my bills, buy groceries, and have a little left over for things I actually wanted. Simple things: a new sweater, a plant for my kitchen, a good pair of shoes. The kind of choices that used to feel small but now meant everything. Sometimes, at night, I'd scroll through my phone and see Ethan's number. I never blocked him, but I never called him back either. The silence between us wasn't angry anymore. It was just quiet. Peaceful. He sent texts once in a while. "How are you? Kids miss you. Can we visit?" I'd read them, but I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because I didn't trust him. There's a difference. Love can survive disappointment, but not betrayal. And forgiveness, at least for me, doesn't mean going back. One Sunday, I was packing up my stall when a young woman stopped by. She bought a slice of pie and asked, "How long have you been doing this?" "About 6 months, I said. "Started small. Just wanted something of my own." She nodded. "Good for you. My mom could never start over after my dad died. She just gave up." I looked at her, then said quietly, "Sometimes we don't give up because we're weak. We give up because we're tired of being told we can't do anything right." She didn't say anything, just nodded and smiled. But I could tell she understood. That night, when I got home, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The city lights flickered in the distance, and for once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel old. I just felt here, present. It's funny how freedom doesn't come with fireworks or music. It comes in little moments: paying your own bills, sleeping through the night without dread, cooking what you want, when you want. It's hearing your own voice again after years of swallowing it. Sometimes people at the market ask if I live with family. I just smile and say, "No, it's just me now." They usually look sad for a second, but I'm not. I had my family once. I did my part. Now, this chapter is mine. A few weeks ago, I ran into a woman from my old neighborhood. She looked surprised to see me. "Margaret, I heard you moved in with your son. How's that going?" I smiled. It didn't. But I'm doing fine. Better, actually. She blinked, like she didn't know what to say. Maybe she expected a story of tragedy. I didn't give her one. Later, I walked back to my apartment, carrying fresh groceries and a small bunch of daisies. My husband used to say I never bought flowers for myself. I guess I do now. At home, I put them in a jar on the kitchen table. I looked around my little apartment, the clean counters, the quiet walls, the smell of baked apples, and realized I had built a new kind of home. One made of peace instead of permission. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't demand to be noticed. It just settles quietly into your life until one day, you realize it's been there all along, waiting for you to open the door. That's what I found. Sometimes I wonder if Ethan ever thinks about that night I left. Maybe he regrets it. Maybe he doesn't. But that's not my concern anymore. I spent too many years defining myself by what others thought of me. Now, I define myself by what I do for myself. I bake. I paint. I laugh with strangers. I sleep soundly. And most of all, I wake up every day knowing that I am free, not because someone gave me permission to be, but because I finally stopped asking for it. People told me I was too old to start over. Maybe they meant well, but they were wrong. You're never too old to take your life back. The hard part isn't leaving, it's realizing how long you stayed where you were no longer respected. These days, I wake up with no fear of footsteps in the hallway, no one telling me what I can or can't do. I drink my coffee slow, bake my pies, and talk to people who actually listen. Sometimes I still think about Ethan. I don't hate him, I just understand him now. Some people only know how to take until you finally stop giving. If someone makes you feel like a burden, remember this. You're not their responsibility, you're your own beginning. Tell me, have you ever had to walk away from people who called themselves family? Share your story. And don't forget to subscribe. Real strength deserves to be heard.